Hello, I'm Ben. I am the Innovation Director at Data Orchard. I'll be hosting this session, which, as I'm about to explain, has some exciting aspects that we've never tried before. I'm just going to do a couple of bits of housekeeping and then we'll get into the main event. Please do chat with people who are here using the chat function. Please do ask questions. You don't hold back, start asking questions from the moment anything occurs to you. If you can use the Q&A function, that will help me because I can lose track of questions if they're in the chat. So if you've got a question, even if you've already asked it in chat, please do put it into Q&A. This session is aimed at what we describe as agencies. So that's organizations that work with other organizations around data maturity. The way it's going to work is my colleague Sian, who, if you've been to other webinars, you will have seen speak, is going to give a bit of a talk about our approach and what we do and what we offer, how we can work with agencies. And then there will be time for questions. The exciting, untried development is we have a second speaker, but they will appear halfway through because they have other commitments. So this could work very smoothly, or it might all go horribly wrong and require extensive editing for the video before it goes live. We'll see. That person is Kate White from Superhighways in London, and she can give you some live experience of actually using some of the stuff that Sian's going to be talking about. So again, some of you have been to some of the recent webinars we've run, so you're probably familiar with Sian, but some of you haven't. So I'll just very briefly say that Sian is one of the co-chief executives of Data Orchard CIC. Her roots are in digital access and inclusion. She became a data champion following over 25 years working in digital technology and bringing the benefits of digital technology to nonprofits. And she leads our work on data maturity in the not-for-profit sector. And I'm now going to hand over to her. If I can remember how to stop sharing my screen, I press that button.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Bear with me for one moment while I do that. So yes, welcome. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who don't know Data Orchard, we are a social enterprise that specializes in helping other organizations to get better with data. And I'm hoping you're here because you're also an organizer working in a role in an organization that's about helping other organizations to get better with data. So we've been researching this concept of data maturity since 2015, and I'm going to assume that most of you are familiar with the framework and the background and the assessment tool. And if you're not, you can have a look at our resources on our website or recent webinars on that subject. In short, our assessment tool is about helping organizations to understand. Sorry, I've just got my screens a little bit mixed up here. It's, in short, our tool's about helping organizations to self-assess how they're doing with data, see how they compare with others, and work out how and what they need to focus on to improve. We launched a free single user version of our assessment tool 2 years ago and a premium, more advanced version 6 months later. And we're really delighted that it's been used by thousands of people now from all kinds of organizations. And we've really seen the evidence of its success as a tool for learning and a catalyst for action to improve. What we've noticed when we've looked at our data about the kinds of people who are using the tool and the feedback data we've had is that around 10 to 15% of the users are agencies or consultants or support providers, presumably like yourselves. So there are several reasons for inviting you here today. Partly it's because I believe we really share the same problem space. Partly it's because we're part of a very small and quite niche service sector with what I believe is quite an enormous and urgent task to address that problem space. And thirdly, I really believe there are mutual benefits to making our data maturity assessment tool available to other partners and agencies. I should state up front that we're primarily interested in those working in the non-commercial space. So for us, we work with lots of charities, social enterprises, public sector organizations, and that's where we, as a social enterprise, seek to have impact. However, we've found there's also been an enormous amount of interest from the commercial sector too, and parts of today's session will be relevant to all sectors. So today I'm going to focus on three things. Firstly, I'm going to describe the tool and how the free and premium versions differ and how it can be customized to support your work with clients. I'm going to talk about the benefits and rewards of using the tool for you and your clients and the wider sector. And I'm going to talk through some practicalities of being an agency user of our tool. So without further ado, I think it would be useful to start with some definitions. So what is data maturity? We define it as this an organization's journey towards improvement and increased capability in using data. And I keep coming back to our definition of data because when we define it very holistically and very broadly, and we mean all of it, not just in one team or one project or one department or one function, not just structured data, not just numeric data and systems, but all of it, which means it's everywhere in an organization, and it can be messy and complex and all over our clients' organization. In every job role, in every department, which is why it really helps to have a simple framework to set around it. So to just give it structure, this is our data maturity framework, which is a very simple framework and structure to put around all that complexity. It aims to be engaging and accessible and understandable to everyone in the organization. And so in particular, mostly, we've done a lot of work with non-technical people and non-datary people, because actually data is in just about every job and role, regardless of whether you have data in your job title. So just a quick recap of the overall framework. We define this 5-stage journey from unaware through emerging, learning, developing to mastering. And we've identified these 7 key themes, which are the crucial factors that need to work together in any organization in order to advance data maturity. So a couple of them are quite obvious: the data and tools that you need to collect, store and analyze. A couple of them are very much about the purposes, so what you're using it for and what questions and approaches you're using for analyzing it. And crucially, a lot of it is about people. So the skills, the leadership, and the culture are all about people. So what is a data maturity assessment? I think it's really crucial to say it's not just a questionnaire. It's really a process. So a really fundamental thing about the tool is that it's a process of engagement with people before, during, and after the assessment questionnaire bit. Then, because primarily it's a tool for learning, we're really excited from our impact evaluation to find that its primary impact is around increasing knowledge and understanding about data and what good and great looks like. It is, of course, an output. So there are reports with scores and benchmarks and priorities that get identified, and I'll show an example of that in a moment. Crucially, it is the start of a journey, and the second biggest impact is that it's a catalyst for action to improve. So the assessment itself, just to give an overview of that, explores those 7 themes in more detail. So it is essentially an online questionnaire designed around the 7 key themes. And the questions focus in on a number of sub-themes for each of those areas. So for example, if you look here in leadership, it's looking at the questions are focused around leadership attitudes, the planning, the capability, and the investment. We've got a number of different versions of the assessment tool, and I'll just describe those for you now, because you're probably interested in what the difference is. I'm assuming most of you have tried the free version, but I'll give links to that later if you haven't. But it's worth setting out the differences between the different kind of products. So we have a couple of free versions. The taster version is really light touch. I mean, it's sort of aimed at trying to engage people who probably really have very little time and very little interest in data. And so we've kind of designed that as a kind of light touch version of it, and it just gives a very quick, you know, overview and a short what sort of rough stage you're at. The more complete version is the individual version. That takes around 20 minutes. It gives the individual a report on what stage they're at, scores them on their themes, and gives them some benchmarking indicators. And that's really that's a single user version. So if you work in a very small organization, then that's ideal if you want to get a few people together. It can take a little while, depending on how much dialogue and discussion you have about the questions. But it works well with very small organizations. But we designed the organ, really, the whole purpose of the data maturity assessment is around engaging people. So the multiple user aspect is what's really key to it. And so for larger organizations who are often you know, much more dispersed or much more complex, the organization version is much more suitable. It's really about getting those different perspectives, and everybody gets their own report, but you also get an overarching organization report, and it can be customized. So I mean, today I'm going to talk about this one in the orange, which is the agency, which is essentially where you would be conducting organizational assessments for your clients. So customization. The first thing is that you can create your own sign-up page, and that you can have that branded. So you can either brand it with your logo, or you can brand it with your client's logo. Some users put both together and have their own and their client's logo. I think it's just about creating a sense of identity and getting people on board when they take the assessment. You can also add your own questions. So those can either be free text or multiple choice questions. We have we have all kinds of different questions that organizations, it might be that you have some particular interests that you want to pursue with your clients, or it might be some particular aspects about the client situation, or you might be interested in internal benchmarking, and I'll mention that in a moment. So you get some unique links that are there for you and your clients. As I say, you get a unique link to the sign up page. Everybody who takes the assessment gets their own report. You have an overarching organization report, which is really, as people are completing it, it's a kind of dashboard where you can monitor how many people have responded to it, and it's combining all of the responses in a much more accurate way than you would if you were doing all individually. And then finally, you get a data download. So obviously you get a copy of your response data returned, either anonymized or non-anonymized. I should emphasize at this point that there is a little bit of contracting that needs to go on just around the data sharing. So there are contractual agreements that need to happen between us and you and your client to be all clear about who's sharing what with who, and how we're handling personal data and privacy. And that, you know, it can be different in different situations. So this is an example of the organization report. So as you can see up in the top left, you would have your own logo or yours and your client's logo. It gives an overview of what stage you're at. So this organization is actually doing quite well. The respondents and their colleagues have scored their organization in the developing stage. It's combined the responses here from 133 people in the organization who have completed the assessment, and it's got an overall score of 3.2 out of 5. And you can see also that it identifies the strengths in the organization. So in this case, they're quite strong on how they're using it, they're quite strong on data, and they're quite strong on culture. But the areas that it's suggesting are priorities to focus on here would be analysis, tools and skills. And then you can drill in to any of those themes, but it's really sort of trying to say, rather than looking at all 7 themes at all stages of data maturity, let's narrow it down to 2 or 3 that you should probably focus on. And you can drill into that and get a little bit more detail. So it will say how the colleagues have scored the organization, how it compares. In this case, it compares exactly the same as the benchmark group. It's the typical average being used here for demonstration purposes. And it describes the current stage that they're in. So this organization is in the learning stage. Its next stage is going to be developing. So it's giving a descriptor of what the next step looks like for the organization. Now, there are lots of different approaches. I mentioned earlier about the data maturity assessment being a process of engaging and learning. And we've worked with lots of different clients and tried out lots of different approaches. I'd like to share some of those here. The first one, as I mentioned earlier, is face-to-face, completing as a group. And that can work quite well as long as the group's quite small, but it can also take quite a long time as well. I think a key thing is about getting the right people to take it. So as representative and diverse as possible is critical. We really emphasize different levels of seniority. So, getting the frontline people who are collecting data very often, as well as those at senior level, getting a diversity of teams and representation from across the organization. So if it's a very small group, that's quite possible to do face-to-face. The other approach that's more commonly used is the sort of online staff survey, and some organizations will have quite clear targets about getting a stratified sample or targeting particular teams. I will say it's a typical response rate to a staff survey would be around 20 to 30%. Prostate Cancer, who recently used our data maturity tool, are our leading champions because they got 57% of staff to complete the assessment, which is quite remarkable, really. But they had a very driven in-house champion. Another approach is the live online workshops. So we were testing this out recently with Scottish Government, with a number of public sector organisations. This is where you get a group of people together for the first time. You introduce data maturity. They go off and take the assessment live, just switch the cameras and microphones off and complete it live, and then come back together and look at the combined organisation report and start talking immediately while you've still got their attention and thinking, and the topic is hot in their head. So that's been a very effective approach. And then there's the combined approach. So an example of this that we found was with Kent County Council. So they're a massive organisation. They've got like 10,000 staff. They took an approach where they got their senior leaders together first to do that live online workshop. So kind of locked them in a room, but they actually really reported back that they really enjoyed it. It was a really different approach, and it really stimulated their thinking, so that the people who were trying to drive data strategy in the organization had got a kind of shared language and thinking there first. And then those senior leaders who'd done it live cascaded it as a sort of online survey with the link to their teams to complete. So there are multiple ways that you can do it. I'd mentioned about internal benchmarking. So one of the things that's, as I say, what we're trying to do is stimulate dialogue here. Sometimes organizations use one of those customized questions to find out which team people are in, for example. And this is quite an interesting thing, particularly in large organizations where you've got different services. This is what's called a box plot. So it describes the range of responses from the lowest to the highest, and the sort of central bulk of them, and this vertical line here is the median. So half are above and half are below in their scores for data maturity for each of those teams. What it tells us is, oops, excuse me. What it tells us is, in this organization, in this sample, you know, that the executive leadership are scoring the organization very low, whereas this service one up here are scoring them much higher. And then there's a lot of diversity of opinion in service area too. So I think what it does is it sparks curiosity. It's an opportunity to identify internal leaders and laggers in an organization, and opportunities to stimulate discussion about those differences. So that kind of really completes the bit about the tool and how it can be customized. I wanted to talk now a bit about the benefits and rewards. And I suppose my starting place is to talk, I mentioned right at the beginning about feeling that we have a shared problem space. I think these are, I would really appreciate if any of you are in the chat channel to feedback whether these are familiar to you. The first one is, I suppose, overall at a macro level, the sector is not very data mature. Some of you may have read our State of the Sector report that draws on all of the data we have about the state of data maturity. And it really emphasizes that you know, it is a spectrum. It is a, you know, organizations are at different levels, but overall they're not very advanced and there's a long way to go. Plus there are a lot of challenges. So do see, as I said, our other webinar and blog posts, but there are a lot of challenges that the sector itself faces. And there are also lots of organizations that need help. I mean, hundreds of thousands of organizations. So we all have work to do. I think, you know, I suppose that's why we're so keen to work in partnership. We're quite a small organization. I know many of the organizations here are quite small. So I do think we have this shared problem space as a group challenge. I think the other thing that's really key is data is not all that popular, and it can be quite hard to engage people, especially senior leaders. I mean, obviously we love data, that's why we're all working in this field, but it's really not the case for most people in the organizations we work with. Our State of the Sector report showed that in 63% of organizations, leaders are not convinced about the value of data, and often it's seen as something that's done to them by external regulators or funders or commissioners. It's often seen as a drain on resources rather than the empowering asset in fighting the organization's cause. And so it is quite challenged to engage those people, especially leaders, in you know, working and driving improvements. And some of the words we've heard used when we talk to people about data, about how they feel about it, are words like stressful and overwhelmed and confusing or frustrating, and or indeed a necessary evil, I've heard it called. And in fact, one CEO, famously, I asked her for 3 words to describe how she felt about data, and she just said, "I hate it." So, you know, we have that challenge that we have to face. And I think a real strength of the tool that I'd really like to share is its accessibility and its user friendliness for people who are not data-y people. The third point on here is about not knowing where to start. I mentioned that already, that it can be large and complex. Sometimes it can be quite hard for us as consultant and support providers to work out where they need the help most. So it's quite a useful tool in both cases. Support can be hard to sell. I say this, whether it's free support. I know a lot of you work for pro bono organizations. A lot of our peers in the nonprofit world offer pro bono support and tell us they find it difficult to sell their free services. And of course, some of us are also working in, you know, we work in a traded context as a social enterprise and trade for social good. But either way, you know, I think it can be hard to sell that, but I think there is an increase. We've certainly noticed a huge increase in demand since the pandemic. There's a lot more interest in digital and data. Data Orchard ourselves are quite what I would call a customer intimate organization. So we could probably only really work with around 30 to 40 organizations on projects a year, and it is growing. But it is, you know, and it's also quite exciting that there are more of these data strategists. As I mentioned, you know, the person in prostate cancer who's an example of an in-house data strategist. So there is certainly a change, and I think it's you know, problem there in that one of the main findings from our State of the Sector report was that only 31% of organizations said they had access to external data and analytics support from experts that they trust. So it's really important for us as providers to be able to show our worth and value, which brings us on to the last point, because for us actually at Data Orchard, one of our key motivations for researching and developing the tool was trying to understand data maturity and whether we're making any difference to those that we're working with. So I'm going to just demonstrate something relevant to this, which is this idea of repeat assessment. So actually, one of the things we do is when we do a first assessment, is we like to think of it as a baseline assessment of where the organization's at. This is a radar chart of mapping two assessments. So the first assessment conducted, this is a cancer support charity that we worked with between 2000. You can see marked out here in the blue. It very much showed that they were weak on their skills and on their tools. And that was where we focused our support. And then we measured them again a year later after completing our consultancy with them. And we were delighted to see that they'd improved considerably in skills and tools, and in fact, a bit in culture. And what's quite interesting here is that usage seems to have reduced, and perhaps it's not always a linear journey. And I know for those of you who are in impact measurement, it can be, you know, it's not always a linear path. Sometimes the increase in knowledge means that there's a difference in how they really understand that they're using tools. We have in fact continued this process since. So we did another follow-up a year after we'd stopped giving them support, because I think another factor in being a consultant is often that what you leave your client with is a set of recommendations, and then it takes them time and resources to implement those. So we were really pleased a year later to see that they had continued to improve, and you can see the usage has gone back up again there. And in fact, we've just completed a fourth assessment. So this is 3 years on, which is continuing to map their progress. I'll just put the first and the last assessment there so you can see the overall change in that organization.
I'm going to interrupt you just for
Yes.
a moment because Kate has appeared. And
Hi, Kate.
now might be a good time, not least because her time with us is limited. Now might be a good time to bring her in to talk about her experience. Can
Perfect.
I ask you to give her a quick introduction to everybody because you have been working with her?
Absolutely, absolutely.
You might want to
Perfect timing, Kate.
Stop sharing your screen as well.
I will stop sharing.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Kate. Thank you so much for joining us. So Kate is a perfect example of somebody who is a support provider who's used Atoll. Kate works for Superhighways in London. She manages their program. She's a very long-standing champion of digital capability building in the non-profit sector, and for some years now also been working in the data field, and recently ran a whole program called DataWise with a set of organizations. So Kate, would you briefly introduce your experience about the data maturity assessment and your DataWise program and how that's helped you with clients?
Yeah, I can. Hi, everyone. So yes, we've been leading with other partners, DataWise London programs, so helping small charities and community groups better use data to shape their services and influence change. So that was our kind of overall aim. And within that, there have been lots of kind of shorter term interventions. We've run and developed and delivered lots of training for groups, but also within it, we wanted to kind of work alongside organisations over a longer period of time, and we designed and piloted really a cohort programme. So we had 8 at the beginning, then 6 organisations that we worked with for over a 9-month period, whilst the pandemic was was on. But we were really keen to be a bit more robust in kind of measuring the change and thinking about the support we're providing and what's possible for those smaller organisations. You know, even with a nice wraparound support programme, can we really look at where they were at the beginning and distance travelled. And we've used various ways of kind of gauging where people are in their data journeys before, from a kind of swimming analogy, treading water, to kind of the Olympic team. But we've also followed the journey of the data maturity assessment right back from, I think, 2016 when you did the research. So yeah, we were really keen not to reinvent the wheel and actually place our cohort program within this wider framework. So quickly, in terms of how we used it, it wasn't a precondition for organisations joining, so we didn't ask people to complete it. We really built in that process of those organisations completing the framework and encouraged them to involve many people from their organisation rather than the one person that kind of joined us monthly during that period of time. And I guess really linked it to co-designing the goals of that programme as well. So the organisations found it a really useful conversation starter at the beginning of that programme. So just the fact that there was an assessment that they could take back to the organisation and complete collectively, started lots of conversations that hadn't been held before, and really got them to think. Obviously, the results, you know, they were then able to access the results, and we could look across the programme in terms of where those organisations were comparatively, which was quite useful. And in terms of co-designing the goals, so each of those organisations had quite different, there were some commonality, but different specific goals for what they wanted to achieve in that programme. What we asked them to do is map those across to those themes, and then we can kind of designed the programme of support and training around that, and that seemed to work really well. Stop me if you've got any specific.
No, I was going to share my screen. Actually, this is what I meant by the perfect timing, because these are some samples from those organisations with their before and after scores.
And what we found was some nice correlation with those, some of the themes that came up from across the cohort, and which really input into kind of how we designed the program. So I think we were having a look at that, weren't we, Sian? I think it was tools, uses, and analysis, I think were kind of common areas of improvement. And that did kind of reflect some of the kind of focus areas that we built into the program. Something that I quite liked as well is the standard set of questions. We were able to add 3 custom questions within the framework. I assume, Sian, that's something that's available for everybody.
It is, yeah.
So that was quite useful, because it meant that, again, at that one point of data collection, we could ask some other questions which we felt maybe weren't covered. So there was a question about how those people felt about their skills and ability to improve the data culture in their organization. And then 2 others, one around the single biggest win. So what would good look like for them? And also a bit more of a kind of free text question around challenge, you know, their organization's greatest challenge.
Great, thank you, Kate, for that. I've got a couple more slides, but I'm conscious, do you have to leave in 5 minutes-ish?
I can hang around for 5 minutes, yeah.
Okay. I think perhaps then, if you're just here for 5 minutes, I'll just quickly give an overview of what we see as the data maturity theory of change, because this is really the process that we see ourselves taking our clients through. And I think it's either us or you perhaps with your clients, because obviously, you know, we've talked about some of the problems about engaging people and what their issues are and why they use the data maturity tool. We've definitely got evidence from our point of view about these immediate benefits, about that improved understanding, a fairly objective view of where they are and where they could get, where they need to focus, and critically this sort of inspired inspiration and motivation to improve. But then what happens next, maybe they'll do it themselves, or maybe they'll have a support of someone like Kate or yourselves, but essentially it's then about the planning, it's about the resources, it's about the implementing of change before you know, these ultimate fruits can be reaped around, you know, the expertise and knowledge and better services and greater impact. Some summaries just quickly of the benefits that we've seen, and I don't know, Kate, whether you'd like to comment on this, but these are some of the impacts that we've had, benefits that we've had reported back from other users. And I think, you know, the impact measurement is quite a key thing of that. Of course, it does assume that you have had an impact. We can make no guarantees about that. It's always a little bit scary, the follow-up assessment, because to some extent it's not always your responsibility or in your control to do that. It's really down to your client and them implementing the recommendations or change. I'm going to stop there and just pause there and ask whether anyone in the audience has got any questions for Kate before she goes. Ben, this might be a good time for you to step in and host briefly.
Yes, no questions have appeared yet, so I'm going to use my privilege of I'm interested. So it's you seem very positive about the framework and the tool, and that's all very nice, but I'm not. Can you just explain a bit more for the people here? What is it that is useful about Low? Because I think it can feel a bit kind of yeah. What actually is it that is useful that you found?
I think for me it was the fact that it was a framework that had been developed kind of on the back, you know, it was linked into research and a kind of a roadmap for improving data maturity in the sector. So it was relevant. I think because we were engaging with 1 or 2 representatives from the organisation, it gave an opportunity for that kind of input, and as I said, conversation started with the wider organisation that we didn't have direct contact with. I think the fact that we were interested to see how it would hold up with some quite different organisations and small ones. So we're talking a couple of organisations with under 100k up to, I think, a couple with between 500 and 1 million. So those smaller charities, whether the language, whether that would be an issue, but I think the feedback was that that was fine. And I think we, from that point forwards, we then tended to look at the themes and talk about the themes. So obviously the answers to their questions, then place them in terms of where they were in those themes. And I think, Sian, we found that it was quite representative, this group, with kind of medium range.
I mean,
of
interestingly, the
other
median for the group was exactly the same, or at least at the beginning in the baseline assessments, the median matched exactly with what we subsequently found from the whole sector analysis as well.
And I think,
and it definitely shifted forwards afterwards.
And moving from kind of learning towards developing or into developing. I mean, there were a couple of organisation scores that, had we scored them ourselves, kind of once we'd started to get to know, there was a little bit of subjectivity maybe going on, but not, overall, I think it kind of matched our expectations. Maybe one organisation had maybe been harder on themselves than another, but I would just say there was maybe 2 outliers from across that group in terms of where we might have plotted them.
That's great. Can we just follow on? I'm conscious you will have to go in a moment, but Nissa Ramsey has asked, what value did it add to you in terms of providing support compared to when you don't use this sort of assessment? E.g., there's an E.g. here, did it enable different kinds of conversation or follow-up compared to not having an assessment?
Yeah, I think for us the difference was the longevity of this intervention and our involvement with those organisations. We don't do so many kind of in-depth data consultancy projects, so the rest of our data support for organisations, as I said, is kind of quick one-off one-to-ones or training. So for us it was really having the opportunity to use it because we had that period of time. So I guess I can't compare with this was the one opportunity that we had where we were working with organisations for long enough, I think, for us to see some meaningful change and to measure that, as I said, in a little bit more of a robust way.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe you have to leave us now.
I have to leave, sorry.
So thank you very much for your time. And if people want to find out more about the work of Superhighways, where should they look?
I can, Sian can share. I think, I don't know if you've mentioned the blog. There's a couple of blogs actually that are on the Data Orchard website. So the kind of the one around the beginning and one around the post-assessment. So have a look there.
That's the best answer. Find out more by going to the Data Orchard website. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thanks for
okay,
thanks for spending
Thank you. Great.
Sian, there are a couple of questions here, but I guess you want to finish your slides.
I've just got a couple of last things I wanted to say, and then perhaps we could get onto those questions. Okay. I just wanted to share a couple of last slides to complete the question and the presentation, really. And I feel like these are really important. So for Data Orchard, collaboration is one of our 5 core values. And I think we can all agree we're working in a really fast moving, a really fast growing, a very diverse field. And it's really dynamic and exciting working in data and analytics. And that's why I love it. I hope that's why you do too. I'm really conscious that nobody knows everything there is to know about data and analytics and organizations. And I recognize, that the knowledge is growing and changing, and it can be quite a complex area. I think we all bring different strengths and specialisms. we have not conducted this research and developed this tool alone at all. We've engaged with hundreds of non-profit organisations in research and development, and included in that are specialists like yourselves. So it's possible that some of you who were on our sort of specialist committees over time, or project steering groups may be here. I think the point being that the tool doesn't stand still. You know, what we think data maturity looks like now will probably be really different in 5 years. So our tool is in a constant state of improvement, and we would really like to engage with other specialists who understand this stuff and work in this context to keep defining and redefining what good and great looks like, and improving the tools to be able to measure it. Secondly, just by using it with your clients, then you're contributing to raising awareness and understanding about what data maturity is in education, and that's a really positive thing. And finally, I suppose by promoting the free data maturity assessment tool, it's good for us all, because that all contributes to us being able to get that state of the sector picture, and for better understanding for policymakers or funders or for ourselves around evidencing the needs and problems of the sector. So, you know, if you're working in a non-profit sector, and you're a non-profit yourself, you know, you can have a button on your website so that people can take the data maturity direct from there. That would be great. So my final thing really is just in terms of the practicalities. Just to recap, you can use our free individual tool. Please do use it with your non-profit clients. If you would like to use the paid version of it, these range from just under £500 to just under £5,000 plus VAT, depending on the size of the organisation. We offer reseller discounts, so you can get a 10% discount on that. If you work in the commercial sector, come and talk to us, and you can book a call out on our website, dataorchard.org.uk/agency. And finally, special cohort packages. We are actually running a whole other webinar next week on Wednesday about cohorts. But if you've got an interest in a particular geography or a subsector or a group of organisations that you want to measure in the way that Kate and Superhighways have, or even at a larger scale with hundreds or thousands of organisations, then there are opportunities there. I will stop talking and take questions.
Okay, we do have some questions. Do keep them coming in. We will finish on time. So first of all, there's a couple of questions related to sector benchmarks.
Mm-hmm.
So I won't name them because they're in the chat. I can't tell if they wanted to be anonymous. So you mentioned sector benchmarks. Is that available for different sectors? And then someone was particularly interested in HE.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we can. So, I mean, in addition to the sort of standard customizations, there are always the options for more in-depth or more specific reporting. What we're finding are there are 4 main groups that are using our tool, or main sectors. We've got what we call the NGO, non-governmental organisation, that would include charities and social enterprises. There are higher education institutions, so universities, public sector organisations and commercials. So certainly we can benchmark specifically and give you those benchmarks. I will say overall, all of those sectors are scoring collectively still in the learning stage. But there are also subsectors within that, like housing or international development or grant makers as well. So anything that you see in the state of the sector report, like benchmarks around income or the activity area or geography or sector, can be provided.
And then Richard Collings asks if there is a community, or are we thinking of setting up a community where these things are being discussed. He would be really interested in hearing stories, sharing problems with other practitioners.
Well, thank you, Richard. Yes, well, we haven't yet had very much activity in it, but we do actually have a Slack community that's quite ripe and ready for discussing such things. And we will share an invitation to all of you to come and join us there and continue these discussions. And certainly we would really like to, keep engaging with this group in particular, who bring so much broad experience and specialism in the field, as we continue to develop our framework, which will be having a new version soon. So we'd really like to get some feedback about that.
I'm just going to take off my my chair's hat for a moment and say, I think we would also welcome any suggestions for ways in which we could support such a community. Like, we think that there should be a community. We'd like to be part of it. We'd like to do things to make it happen, but we also would like suggestions from people within that community about what's the best way to do that. We have an anonymous question. In fact, Richard has already sent a suggestion, which is an occasional meetup, which is a thing we'll take on board. Anonymous question: have you found using the tool helps to influence leaders about the need for investment or more staffing to focus on improving data maturity?
Yes, actually, I feel really excited about this. In our impact evaluation, where we contacted all the users of the tool, around half of them said that they had gone on to develop some kind of plan for improvement. And around half of them, so about a quarter, said they had applied to get resources for it, either internally through their in-house budgets or externally through funding. And all of them had been successful. So that's really exciting. And one of the, when I talk about our theory of change, that was one of the things that was most rewarding, I think, in the feedback. So these are not necessarily our clients. Some of them are just users of the free tool, but certainly with the clients that we work with, usually it's a step towards what is it we need to do, and then what resources will we need to implement that. And I think it's been a very useful thing to have a consistent and independent tool that we use to present where the organizations are and engage them in what their needs are.
Okay, I think that's probably a good place to end it. So I'll just do some thanks to various people. So thank you very much to Kate White for taking time out of a very busy schedule to come and share her experience. And thank you to Sian for giving us that presentation. But most importantly, thank you to everybody who's attended this webinar. Whether or not you've asked questions, we really hope that you stay in touch with us, and we'll be doing more of these events. And so any feedback about different sorts of events that we could do, we'd love to hear all of that. I'll stop rambling on. Thank you very much. Goodbye.